Hello, everybody that is here.
Hi.
Hi. Just a quick little note. Today is Tuesday, the 29th of September.
International Podcasting Day starts right now for New Zealand and stuff. Yeah.
Meh. International Podcasting Day.
Podcasting Day.
.com, yeah.
I'm at internationalpodcastingday.com.
Yeah. And we're not really podcasting today because we both had some things. So,
well, I mean, we're kind of podcasting today.
Sure.
We're doing something.
We're doing something. That's fair enough. So, anywho, if you happen to be watching this right now, we're just going to do the Better Podcasting download and then we'll re-air it on Friday. Because on Friday, of October, the 2nd of October is when we're going to actually stream or do the full recording at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern time, Geeks.live as well. But we thought because it was last minute, we kind of made this decision last minute. We just for the production of the show, we decided to bump it to Friday. So
funny enough, Bangs asked in the chat, but Friday is the permanent record day. Yeah, so Friday will be the bulk of the show that we record, but we have a special little thing for you today called the download, and a lot of people would be interested in it, so we're going to go ahead and do that today.
Yes, but to be clear, we usually stream on Tuesdays. Normally it's Tuesdays. Next Tuesday we should be back to normal, Tuesday at the regular 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, but Friday is the real or the rest of the show, and then I'll slide in the Better Podcasting download that we'll record today. So we'll do a little movie magic there, assuming that my house doesn't get hit by a satellite, which could happen.
Many countries, many space agencies have been targeting your house for quite some time, so eventually it will happen.
Hold on. I'm just making sure.
I'm just trying to get, that for those that come here for the, was it ASMR?
Yeah, that's right.
And I don't know what that stands for, although I should, because I think there was a Curiosity episode on it. No clicks. Please, no clicks. I'm going to de-click that right away.
All right. Okay, well, should we do this? Are you good?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
All right. We're recording. We're good. All right, let's do this. And thanks for anybody who is watching it right now. Even between now and Friday, we really appreciate you checking it out. And hey, come back on Friday. Again, if you're watching it before Friday, come back Friday, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern.
This is the Better Podcasting Download.
Stargate Pioneer. For those who missed the Better Podcasting live chat last week, episode 17, you missed the fact that SP was away and I had a special guest co-host, Chris Farrell, on that episode, and we still featured a little bit of feedback from the one and only Stargate Pioneer because you had sent it to us with your first impressions of the Zoom H8. As you had mentioned in the last episode, you'd got the Zoom H8 and you were going to test it while you were away, and we thought today we would do our Better Podcasting download as your first impressions of the Zoom H8, because you got a lot more to say than the little snippet that we put in last week's Better Podcasting live chat. And also we wanted to make sure to hit the whole audience here, because I think you got some, like you and I have talked before the show, you got some really important things to say about this, and I think people need to know. So I'm just going to turn it over to you. I'm just going to listen and maybe just enjoy this moment of Stargate Pioneerness.
Well, you feel free to break in with any questions, because I'm sure your questions would be similar to what the listeners have. So if you want to see me unboxing the Zoom H8, there's a video over on the Gonna Geek Gear channel. I did that right before I left. It was really quick and dirty, and I did that to ask our audience, ask the Gonna Geek Gear YouTube channel audience if they had any questions about the Zoom H8, and I was going to be using it over the course of the next couple of weeks because I was going to be out of town on vacation, and I wanted to hear questions on how people wanted to see me review it and answer in a follow-on review. And I still plan to do that full review video. What we're going to talk about right now is just my first impressions. It's not going to be a full review like I still plan to do over on the Gonna Geek Gear YouTube channel. So I unboxed it. I used it for a couple of weeks, and I'm going to put used in quotes because it was limited to what I was able to do. I did immediately update the firmware. It came with firmware 1.0, and by the time that I opened it and was able to use it, the firmware 1.2, which was released on August 31st, 2020, was released. So I updated the firmware to 2.1. I have actually no idea what the differences are between firmware 1.0 and 1.2, but 1.2 is what I was using it. And right before we went on the air, I checked the Zoom website. 1.2 is still the current latest firmware to be used, and I do anticipate them updating that firmware as we go on. I'm going to cut to the chase right here to basically the bottom line, and I'm going to tell you that this is a phenomenal, updated and upgraded H6, and basically the new top of the line to the handy recorder line, the portable handy recorder. So you could call it the granddaddy or grandmommy, whatever your gender preference is, to the handy recorders. However, it has some significant limitations that may make you look elsewhere for a podcasting recording device. In my opinion, we'll get more into that later. So the first thing that I noticed is that most of the touch button controls that you find on the H6, the play, pause, and the fast forward volume controls, the menu controls, what have you, are actually on this touch screen for the H8. I just had to home it right there, but that is what you see, and you see it's in color, and it is pretty big in comparison to the H6, but unfortunately, because it's a touch screen, it's not really big enough, in my opinion. My fat fingers kept on pushing the wrong button, and I would either have to go back or go back to the home in order to say what I needed to do on it and then move on. And it is a little bit clumsy in the things that you have to do, like the headphones volume or the line out volume. There's a slider that you have to go back and forth on the touchpad. It is either oversensitive or not sensitive enough for my fingers, or maybe my fingers just don't have the correct electronic charge in them or whatever, but it was really clumsy moving that slider back and forth, and it was inaccurate to what I wanted. Like I wanted 60%, and I could never get 60%. It was like 65%, 55%. It was all over the place. Could never get 60% on the headphone volume. And that is a limitation, I think. And once you get it into a mode, it is not intuitive as you're originally using it, that the home button is actually the stop button on the recorder. There's no home button. You can't get out of some modes on the screen. You actually have to go to the home button in order to get back. So there's some limitations with the touch screen itself. Moving on, here's what I did and did not test in my 2 weeks, because that's very important. I have not done a full test of this. First of all, I did not explicitly test the preamps. I know everybody's worried about that for every machine. Is this good enough to drive my microphone? It's a legitimate issue. I didn't have any problems with it. I was using a Sennheiser MD46 with it. I did have other microphones with it. I did have the Rode PodMic. I had the various USB XLR microphones that we use, the AT2005. I didn't use any of those. So I just used the MD46, and I did not explicitly test the preamps. I also did not record a podcast with it, and there's a reason for that. I did not try the Bluetooth BTA1 interface capability. There's also a reason for that. And I did not try out the capsule capability. There's not really a reason for that other than I didn't have an incredible amount of time for it. And I did use it, though, as an audio interface. Now, why did I not do the bulk of that stuff, and why did I just use it as an audio interface? Because when I set it up and I looked hard about finding the capability to use it as an audio interface and record, just like you can with the Sound Devices MixPre 3 and MixPre 6, the MixPre line. You can use a mix minus back and forth to record what's coming in from your computer and then record other things on other channels. You cannot do that on the Zoom H8. I have no idea if the hardware is capable of doing it or not. I did send an email to Zoom asking if there was the possibility to record on the Zoom H8 while using it in an audio interface. Now, Stephen, you read that email, correct?
I did, yes. And that was something. Hey, you know what? We'll just edit that because let me just pull it up.
I was buying time, so I got it up there.
You got it?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Yes, I did. And I know for those of you who have listened to the Better Podcasting live chat, you've heard us go through that. But we know that not everybody subscribes to that show. So we're going to go through it again because we think that it's important that we read Zoom's direct response. And SPA, you go ahead, take it away.
So the email that I sent them on their contact us page, because I didn't have a direct contact email for anybody at Zoom, I said, "Hi, I'm a podcaster and I connect with guests over the internet. Is there a way to use the Zoom H8 as an audio interface and record both multi-track locally and the incoming audio from my PC? Basically, if I have myself and 2 co-hosts in my room, please use the SoundPad. Can I send that to my PC so our guests through the computer can hear it and record everything multi-track in my room, plus the guests over the computer on their own track?" And they responded. One of the representatives from Zoom responded, said, "Hello. Unfortunately, there is no way to do this with the H8 as it cannot record locally when in audio interface mode. You could potentially record the audio from the computer using the line in on the capsule coming from the headphone port, but you would not be able to send your audio back to the computer. Please let me know if you have any other questions." As Stephen mentioned, he talked about it in the Better Podcasting live chat last week in 17. This is the main reason why I did not use this. I had no other gear with me. Well, I mean, I could have done it the way that I always do. I still had my H5 with me. I had the H6 with me right here, and I had the H8 with me, all of which can be used in conjunction with the microphones that we have said are great for starting out for podcasters, the AT2005, the ATR 2100, and the Samsung Q2U. I actually had all 3 microphones with me because I took my big podcast bundle because I wanted to do a myriad of tests with the Zoom H8. But once I got to this point and I had other things happening around me, I decided it wasn't worth my time to go any further because this was not going to be able to do the things that I wanted it to do. It has a podcast mode. We'll talk about that in a second, but it is not capable of recording a mix minus back and forth through an iPad or a computer as you are multi-tracking on the device. Now, Stephen, I didn't actually have a chance yet to listen to your response to that specific limitation last week. So could you summarize what you said last week?
Yeah, just was kind of highlighting that essentially this is an indication that the H line is going to continue to be primarily geared towards something in person. Now, whether that's people together in person, that's musicians in person, or that is you using other equipment to do internet connections, but still at the end of it, it would be a setup that you would have in person. That's clearly an indication here that the H line is not meant to do anything to do with electronic communication. That's just not what their goal is here. And I was a little confused when they'd had the P4, was it P4 announced? And then
P4.
And then this was on the heels of the H8 because they had podcasting in both of them and it was confusing. But to me, this sucks for you. This sucks for people who plan to use it the way that you were. But I think it's a really good indication that this is continuing to go with that division of the H line being handheld, sort of in-person type scenario use without really internet communication. That was my point.
And I'm glad we're thinking alike, because that's ultimately my point too. Now, I talked a little bit about modes. There are 4 recording modes that you can find on the H8. And I'm showing, for our video users, I'm showing it up on the screen right now. You have a field mode, which you can multi-track with. You have a music mode, which I think ultimately is a stereo track. And then you have a podcast mode, and then you have an audio interface mode. Now, once again, you cannot record through the audio interface mode, but you can send multi-track through the USB to your computer. I don't like to record that way. As many of you know, both Stephen and I like to record off board our main computers for a lot of reasons. And we have a lot of How I Save My Podcast stories about that. So we want to record on the device. We don't want to use the device as an audio interface solely to send it to the computer. Now, the podcast mode, as far as I can tell, can only record a single stereo track. That's a limitation. I want a multi-track. So why would you want to use the podcast mode? You can use the sound pads that are on there to play little sound pads as you're recording, maybe in somebody's office, and do an all-in-one production, so that you can take the file out and throw it up on the internet. We don't advocate doing that. We advocate actually editing your file. There's a lot of reasons you should do that. There is leveling that you should do. There is things in the audio that you might want to take out, like crutch words. There are statements that you might want to take out. You might want to reorder things if it makes more sense. Depends on who you're interviewing, if you're interviewing, that sort of thing. So I don't particularly like that. I would use this in the field mode where I could do a multi-track recording. Interestingly enough, the music mode does have a EQ on 2 channels, like M1 and M2. It's a 3-band EQ. You can check that out, but if you're interested in that, it might be for you. Some other thoughts about the H8. It did not come with a case like the H5 does and the H6 does. It did not come with a case. It just came in a box. So I've been traveling with it in a box because I don't want to mark this thing up. It is mine. Zoom did not send it to me. I bought it. I do not intend on returning it, although if I hadn't used it for 2 weeks, I might have, but I used it for 2 weeks. And I did use it for 2 weeks as an audio interface. I did work calls. I was teleworking while on vacation. Great. Social distancing, the pandemic. You can actually work on vacation. I don't advocate doing that, but I had a couple of important meetings and I was able to do it because I was using this. So if you have one of these, you can, and a microphone, you can do that. The headphone port out, and I know Stephen has commented on this before, it is very noisy. All of the Zoom devices I have, I just held up the Zoom H5, the H6, I have the H8. Stephen, you have used the L12 or 20 before, you have the 12, you have the L8, and all of them have noisy headphone port outs, correct?
I would say the H devices are noisier than the L devices.
Okay.
In my experience.
Okay. And you also have an H6, so you can compare between the H6 headphones out and the L series headphones out.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So very noisy headphones. It's a Zoom trait, and I wish they would fix it. But on the other hand, it's something that I can live with because of all the other capabilities. And from what I've heard, the P4 also suffers from it. I don't know if the P8 does or not, which, by the way, was announced the second week that I was out on vacation. So had I had my vacation later, I might have taken the P8 with me instead of the H8. It's very similar. The H8, by the way, is very similar build quality to the H6 and the H5. Kind of robust. It's still plastic. It's not like a hard metal or anything, but for what it is, I think it's well put together. I do like the fact that the gain knobs are not digital. And I really like that because of the problems that I had getting the digital volume controls to the right place. If they were sliders in there, I just would not like it. And it's not like you have an up down button like I believe the H4 does. I don't have an H4n, but I believe the H4n has up down buttons that you can use to be discrete in going up and down. And the H8 does not have that. So I'm very glad that the gain buttons for the channels are all knobs. They're small knobs. I do have big fingers, as I talked about before, and I'm able to adjust them with no problem. I've had years of experience with all of those devices, so it's no big deal. We already talked about the music mode does have the 3-band EQ to it. I did not use that. I just want to reiterate there. So let's go into my initial conclusion of using this. I definitely will say that I have buyer's remorse. And that's hard for me to say on a device like this, because 5 years ago, when we started Better Podcasting, I would have said, you need to get yourself, if you have multiple people in the same room, if you do stuff like if you're tabletop gaming and you're trying to record between 6 and 10 people, this would be an incredible deal for you to have. And it still is if that's what you're doing. But if you're doing anything over the internet at all, this cannot do that mix minus, and you have to jury rig it up with another device. And I think there's other devices that do it without getting another device right now. And I would not get that. So I was hoping for the Sound Devices MixPre 3, 6, 10 USB mix minus capability. I didn't have that. The P8 was announced while I was on vacation, and I already had the H6 to perform almost all the functions, except for it's only capable of 6 channels, which I've never had to go beyond that. But that's it. That's the only plus that I can see for me as a podcaster over the H6. So I have buyer's remorse on this, Stephen. And what do you feel about that, of me having buyer's remorse on a piece of podcasting gear? This is rare.
I'm disappointed to hear that, but at least I don't have to buy it to find out about it.
Fair enough.
No, seriously, that does suck to hear. Like, it's disappointing because it looked pretty promising. I have taken a lot of shots at their original promo video that they put on YouTube, because the podcasting section on that promo was really cliche. It felt very disconnected with what a podcast was, and it felt like they had in their own mind what a podcast was. So I've taken a lot of shots against that, but I did give it credit for having a podcast feature in it, and it gave me hope that it might work for sort of an average podcaster. But I guess, again, it's that H-line division where it seems like they're not wanting to make it used for an online communication, which is too bad. And I guess the P line isn't really handheld recording, though, is it? So it's kind of like
the P4 is small, though. We'll
Yeah.
see. I said in the Discord channel that I do plan to purchase a P4. It just hasn't arrived yet. So we'll see what the differences are in terms of functionality for podcasting versus the podcast mode here on the H8. I think Zoom could have done more for the H8. I think they were either too busy developing the P4 and the P8, but didn't have enough oomph to put it into the H8, or they simply don't understand how most podcasters would use it. Possibly, as you said at the beginning of the segment, they have a music priority. I would concur with that, in my opinion, that they have a music priority. But since there's more and more podcasters, it's more and more of the market. I don't know what the division is right now. We talked about that before on the show, where most of the audio gear has been geared towards musicians, simply because musicians by far still today are the bulk of the consumers for this consumer electronics. There are other options out there as well, even in the Zoom family with the P4 and the P8, but there's also the Tascam stuff right now, which you can multi-track record in the mixer. There's the Rodecaster Pro. There's the Sound Devices if you want a portable recording device. So there are other options.
A billion Kickstart devices that will probably not be good, but maybe, who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, maybe
We'll see.
maybe like there's, and I don't think this is Kickstarter, but the Go XLR, I believe, was one of them. So I mean, it doesn't have the same capability of multi-tracking, but you had that as well. And as I said at the beginning of this segment, when I gave my assessment up front, in my opinion, I think most podcasters should look elsewhere for their portable recording capability rather than the Zoom H8. And some of those elsewheres include the Zoom line. So I'm not saying Zoom sucks as podcasters don't get anything Zoom, but I'm saying that the H8 is probably not where you want to vector into.
I should tease right now, by the way, if you want to come to our Discord at betterpodcasting.com/Discord, hit me up on to do with the P8, why I have a couple issues on there about my thoughts about them being disconnected from the podcast industry.
The one difference from the H8 over the P4, and I see Bangs Nutty Bits in the chat right now has mentioned it, that the P4 is just 44.1 kilohertz and 16-bit only for the recording. You do have the entire suite of recording capabilities to use on the H8. You can select anything that you can already select with the H6 in terms of bit rate and frequency rate. So that is good with the H8, but again, there's a severe capability limitation for most hobby podcasters as we know it that I would not recommend for it. In the Discord server, I was asked by multiple people if I would return it or possibly use it as a replacement for the H6 in my studio. Unless the preamps are significantly better, like an order of magnitude better than the H6, I don't see a reason for me to switch out the H6 for the H8 other than it's a bigger machine, which in my case, I want a smaller desk profile anyway. So that doesn't really help me there. And as far as returning it, I bought it. I used it for 2 weeks. I'm not going to return it. And I might want to keep it for later A/B testing with something else or comparison with something else. So I plan to keep it. But if I could trade it in for a P8, I probably would, honestly, at this point. You're at the same price point. One's $399, one's $499. I would really have preferred to have used that money for the P8 versus the H8. So, but I don't plan to return it. I feel that it would be a bad consumer having used it for 2 weeks, traveled 720 miles one way with it, 720 miles back, and then return it. I just don't think that's good. And I do plan on doing the full review video still. So that's another use that I'll have for it as well. And that's about it. I mean, the last 3 points I've already said. I'm going to do a complete review on the Gonna Geek Gear channel. I have a P4 on order and the P8 has my attention. But yeah, the thing about the P8 versus this is I don't have a scale of size. I haven't done a size comparison of it, but it's going to be significantly bigger to fit in my mobile bag, and I wanted something small. So maybe the Sound Devices MixPre 6 is what I need. I don't know.
Well, thanks for giving your first thoughts. I look forward to seeing what else you got to say when you do a full review, but I think that was quite comprehensive for what our audience needs to know at this point. And if you do have any other questions for SP, come to our Discord, betterpodcasting.com/Discord. Ask him over there, and everybody else will watch his answer because everybody's got their eyes on SP's first impressions of this. Let's go ahead and move on to the Better Podback. All right, if you're just joining us now, we were just doing the Better Podcasting download today. On Friday, we'll do the rest of the show. If you want to check us out at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern at Geeks.live, we will return there. We'll go ahead and slide this back in. Jury's out whether we'll slide it in the proper spot or do it after the pod back. I don't know. We'll figure it out that between now and then. I got a few days to figure that out. We'll see. But come back on Friday, and thanks if you did come by today. I know we had quite a few people already. We just wanted to give you something right now, and we just had a couple things come up that we just had to bump the rest of the recording to Friday. So thanks everybody who came on by, and thanks to those who also pointed out that the audio was clipping. I'll give you a little inside information on that. The way I've got this split up because of actually the L8, I could do it the proper way, but I got to see if that issue is here with my new rig, right? But with the L12, I don't have a way to easily get the mix down from the board into the streaming service, or the streaming software I use, XSplit.
Mm.
So I use the UMC 202 HDs for the streaming only.
Mhm.
So all the other audio is going to my L8 and being recorded there, or when I'm using the L12. But for the stream, there is a separate connection that goes in there. And the way I do that is I take the analog out. Why the hell's my phone ring? Anyways, I gotta go in a second, but sorry, that phone never rings.
The kids are burning down the house.
Yeah.
It's an automatic update from your Alexa IFFT. Sorry about that, Bing.
Sorry. Okay, so anyways, long story short, it goes through a headphone amp, and I keep bumping the headphone amp because the knob's next to the other one. But I gotta go. Sorry, I do gotta run, everybody. Thanks everybody for coming by. Come back please on Friday, if you can, at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern at geeks.live.